The galaxy was teeming with civilizations, many older and far more advanced than Earth. To these mighty species, humanity was a relatively new and primitive force, an insignificant blip on the cosmic radar. Until the day they made the mistake of underestimating Earth. The Alliance of the Celestial Dominion, a coalition of powerful, technologically superior alien races, had long ruled the galaxy with an iron fist. They controlled vast swaths of space, enslaving lesser species to fuel their empire. It was in their nature to expand, conquer, and destroy anything they deemed unworthy. But Earth, for all its flaws, was a different kind of planet. The humans had a rage within them, a fire that would not be extinguished. It wasn't just anger, it was a seething, unstoppable force that had driven them to survive and thrive against impossible odds. This was a trait the Alliance had yet to truly understand. The first contact came unexpectedly. A fleet of Dominion warships entered Earth's solar system without warning. Their mission was clear: neutralize the primitive world and seize its resources. Earth's military was laughable by galactic standards. Humanity had yet to develop the advanced technologies of their alien counterparts. They had no warp drives, no energy shields, no weapons capable of even scratching the paint on an alien cruiser. Or so the Dominion thought. General Valerie Graves, commander of Earth's Unified Defense Forces, stood on the bridge of the Solstice, the largest military vessel ever constructed by humanity. The warship was a symbol of Earth's desperation, designed to hold off the Dominion until reinforcements could arrive. Graves, however, had no intention of waiting. She knew that Earth's greatest strength wasn't its technology, it was its unyielding will to survive. "General, their ships are within range," said Commander James Tabor, his voice steady, but tinged with worry. "They're powering up weapons." Graves nodded. She was calm, resolute, her expression hardening like steel. "Hold your ground," she said, voice as sharp as a blade. "We are Earth's last hope. We will show them what happens when they awaken the fury of a world that has fought to survive for millennia." The first shot came from the alien fleet, an overwhelming barrage that obliterated most of Earth's outer defense satellites. For a moment, it seemed like humanity's final hour had come. Yet, in that chaos, the human response was something the Dominion wasn't prepared for. In an instant, Earth retaliated. What the Dominion had failed to anticipate was the ingenuity of humankind. Using modified nuclear warheads and advanced chemical propulsion, the Solstice's crew had managed to create a makeshift energy cannon capable of unleashing a massive pulse of energy. The blast was enough to disable the lead warship, sending shockwaves through the enemy fleet. The Dominion ships faltered. It was the first crack in their perceived invincibility. The aliens were quick to regroup, but their response was tentative. They had never fought a species that could think this way, one that could improvise with such ferocity. Earth's human soldiers were not bound by the traditional rules of warfare, they fought with a savage creativity that the Dominion was ill-equipped to counter. As the battle raged, word of humanity's defiance spread across the galaxy. Alien eyes, once indifferent, began to turn toward Earth. Some saw it as a temporary setback, a mere inconvenience to their grand design. Others, however, began to fear the humans, sensing something in their spirit that they had never encountered before. Commander Tabor watched the Dominion fleet regroup, their ships seemingly more cautious, their tactics more defensive. "They're scared," he muttered, disbelief in his voice. Graves turned to him, her eyes cold. "Let them be afraid. We've only just begun." It was in that moment that humanity's destiny among the stars was sealed. The Dominion would never see it coming, how the rage of a small, unremarkable planet could become the galaxy's most dangerous weapon. Earth was a planet of survivors, and its warriors, born from centuries of adversity, would rise to claim their place among the stars. And the aliens would soon learn that the rage of humanity could never be contained. In the wake of Earth's unexpected victory against the Dominion's first assault, the galaxy was on edge. News of the human resistance spread quickly, sparking rumors and concerns among the alien races that had long dominated the stars. The once unchallenged celestial Dominion began to see cracks in their empire, as their leadership struggled to maintain control in the face of a human uprising that no one had predicted. General Valerie Graves knew that the battle for Earth was far from over. The Dominion would not simply retreat, they would regroup, refocus, and come back with a vengeance. She had seen the tactical hesitation in their fleet's movements, the uncertainty that had rippled through their ranks. The fight had only just begun, but humanity had made a statement: they would not go down quietly. The human military forces, once fragmented and disorganized, were now united under a single banner. The Earth Defense Coalition, EDC, was born out of necessity, its ranks swelling with volunteers from every nation, driven by a singular purpose: defend their home, their families, and their very way of life. But they knew they couldn't stand alone forever. It wasn't long before humanity's allies began to emerge. The first to offer aid were the Krellians, a race of insectoid creatures who had once been slaves to the Dominion. They had heard the stories of humanity's defiance and decided to throw their lot in with the humans, offering their superior knowledge of intergalactic warfare and their vast fleet of warships. In exchange, they asked only one thing: to see the Dominion brought to its knees. But it wasn't just military support that humanity needed, it was information. While the Dominion's fleet was vast and its war machine nearly invincible, they were not without weaknesses. The human race had always excelled at espionage, using tactics that were as unpredictable as they were effective. The EDC established covert operatives known as the Ghosts, a team of elite soldiers trained to infiltrate enemy lines, gather intelligence, and sabotage the Dominion's infrastructure from within. These Ghosts would become the cornerstone of humanity's rebellion, sowing discord and confusion among the Dominion's ranks. One such Ghost, Captain Dylan Hayes, was on a mission to infiltrate a Dominion research station located on a barren moon. The station, a fortress of technology and mystery, housed critical data on the Dominion's weapons and tactics, information that could turn the tide of the war in humanity's favor. Hayes and his team boarded a stolen Dominion stealth ship, cloaked from radar and disguised as one of the enemy's own. As they neared the station, the cold void of space seemed to stretch infinitely around them, the stars offering no comfort. "This is it," Hayes whispered, his breath steady despite the tension. "We get in, grab the data, and get out. No heroics. Just survive." His team nodded in agreement, each member focused on the task at hand. They had trained for this, prepared for every eventuality. But even they knew that no plan ever survived contact with the enemy. As they docked at the station, the air was thick with the weight of what they were about to do. The Dominion had not taken kindly to Earth's resistance, and any human captured would be tortured or executed. The stakes couldn't have been higher. They had no room for error. The inside of the research station was a maze of steel corridors and harsh lighting. Every step echoed through the empty halls, and the silence felt oppressive. The Dominion's security systems were formidable, but human ingenuity had already given them a way in. Every Ghost carried a small, handheld device that could bypass the Dominion's most advanced security protocols, a gift from the Krellians. The team moved quickly, their boots making no sound on the polished floors. They reached the heart of the station, the main data core, a towering structure of shimmering, alien technology. As Hayes approached it, his mind raced with the possibilities of what they might uncover. "What are we looking for?" whispered Sergeant Lila Tran, her eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. "Everything," Hayes said, his voice low and purposeful. "The Dominion's plans, their weaknesses, anything that can give us an edge." As the data was downloaded into their encrypted devices, a faint alarm suddenly blared, a piercing, shrill sound that sliced through the tension. They'd been detected. "Move!" Hayes shouted, already turning toward the exit. The Ghosts raced through the halls, weapons drawn, hearts pounding with adrenaline. The Dominion soldiers weren't far behind, their footsteps growing louder with every passing second. But it wasn't the enemy's pursuit that kept Hayes awake at night, it was the knowledge that their first victory against the Dominion had been a fluke, a stroke of luck. The real fight had only just begun. The news that the Ghosts had successfully infiltrated the Dominion's research station spread quickly throughout the human military ranks. The stolen data was invaluable, insights into the Dominion's fleet structures, weaponry, and most importantly, their weakness. The humans now had the upper hand, but it came at a steep cost. The Dominion was no longer underestimating them. A ruthless counteroffensive was imminent. General Valerie Graves stood before a holographic map of the galaxy in the command center of the Solstice, her face lit by the cold blue light. The Dominion was already regrouping, and their vengeance would be swift. Intelligence reports confirmed the arrival of their elite task force, the Dread Legions, a terrifying group of genetically enhanced warriors, renowned for their brutality and unrelenting nature. These were the Dominion's true soldiers, not the bureaucrats who had first underestimated humanity. "They'll come for us in force," Graves said, her voice steady but filled with resolve. "We've provoked them. And now we'll see what they're really made of." On the ground, the Earth Defense Coalition was preparing for the worst. The once unified forces were now facing an overwhelming flood of Dominion warships and soldiers, their numbers far superior to the combined might of humanity's scattered forces. But Earth's warriors were undeterred. They had the knowledge and the will to fight, and now, they were backed by the Krellians' military might. Captain Dylan Hayes, having barely escaped the Dominion Research Station, was tasked with delivering the stolen intel to Graves and coordinating the next phase of the resistance. His mind raced as he made his way to the Solstice, knowing that the human survival instinct would soon be tested in ways they had never imagined. The stolen data hinted at a weakness in the Dominion's network of hyperspace relays. Communications could be severed, entire fleets isolated. But there was a catch. To exploit this vulnerability, the humans would have to take down the Dominion's strongest defense yet, the Relic Fortress, a mobile, superweapon-equipped base capable of destroying entire planets. It was the heart of the Dominion's control, an unstoppable force in the galaxy. To even approach it was suicidal. When Hayes arrived on the Solstice, Graves wasted no time in laying out the plan. "We have one chance. If we can destroy the Relic Fortress, we can cripple the Dominion's command structure," she said, her voice cold and calculated. "We'll need a strike team to infiltrate the heart of their fleet, disable their weapon systems, and make sure that fortress is rendered useless. We won't get another shot at this." Hayes knew that this mission would require every ounce of human determination. It was a suicide run, but he was ready. The ghosts had proven themselves before, and now, they would lead the charge. Meanwhile, in the depths of Dominion-controlled space, the Dread Legions were being deployed. These were not just soldiers, they were the result of twisted experiments, enhanced with cybernetic implants and genetic modifications that made them stronger, faster, and deadlier than anything humanity had ever seen. Their leader, General Call, was a towering figure with skin as black as void, a hulking mass of muscle and mechanical augmentation, his cold, red eyes burning with the promise of destruction. He had led the Dominion's most ruthless campaigns and was feared across the galaxy. "I'll make them pay," General Call growled as he reviewed the intelligence reports. "They've poked the hornet's nest. Now, they will burn." The Dread Legions were deployed in full force, ready to eradicate the human threat once and for all. The Dominion believed that humanity's initial success was nothing more than a fluke, a brief moment of defiance. Call would make sure that any hope the humans had was crushed under his boot. Back on Earth, Hayes and his team began their final preparations for the mission that could either save humanity or doom them all. The Solstice was outfitted with new experimental weaponry based on the stolen Dominion tech, including EMP devices and cloaking mechanisms that would give them a fighting chance against the might of the Relic Fortress. As they prepared to launch, General Graves gathered the team together. "This is it," she said, her voice filled with a rare moment of vulnerability. "We're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting for the future of every world the Dominion has ever oppressed." Hayes stood beside her, his eyes steely and determined. "We'll give them hell, General." With a final nod, Graves gave the order. The fleet powered up, and the strike team launched toward the heart of Dominion territory. Their destination, the Relic Fortress. The battle to come would test every limit of human courage and ingenuity. But one thing was certain, humanity's rage, once ignited, could never be extinguished. The vast blackness of space was both a terrifying and awe-inspiring backdrop as the human fleet, bolstered by their Krellian allies, approached the heart of Dominion-controlled space. Captain Dylan Hayes and his team stood on the bridge of the Solstice, looking out through the viewing windows as the stars slowly shifted into the looming presence of the relic fortress. It was a monstrosity, an enormous mobile base that dwarfed any known ship in the galaxy. Its weapon systems alone could wipe out entire planetary systems, let alone defend against a single fleet. The humans had no illusions about the odds. They were venturing into the lion's den, fully aware that survival was uncertain at best. General Valerie Graves paced the command center, her fingers dancing over the holographic controls as she adjusted the fleet's approach vector. "We've got one shot at this. We breach the perimeter, deploy the strike teams, and take down their core systems. If we don't do it now, we'll never get another chance." She turned to Hayes, who stood by the tactical display. "Ready, Captain?" Hayes nodded without hesitation, despite the weight of what was at stake. The data they had stolen from the Dominion's research station was their guide, leading them to weak points in the fortress's defenses. There was a slight chance, just a sliver, that they could disable its main reactor before the Dread Legions could crush them. "We'll breach from the east flank. I'll lead the strike team myself," Hayes said, a grim determination in his voice. He was ready to die if it meant taking down the Dominion's most powerful weapon. Graves held his gaze for a moment before nodding. "Just don't get yourself killed, Captain." As the fleet neared the fortress, tension surged through the crew. The Solstice's stealth technology flickered on, cloaking them from the Dominion sensors, but even with the best technology, the odds were still stacked against them. The Dread Legions were on their way, their monstrous figures already deployed in space, their battle-scarred warships cutting through the vacuum like a deadly shadow. The final stage of the war had begun. Suddenly, alarms blared, and the calm atmosphere of the bridge turned into chaos. "They've detected us," shouted Lieutenant Zara Knox, the fleet's communications officer. "The Dominion's defenses are active, there's no turning back now." Graves' voice cut through the panic. "Keep your course. We get to that fortress, or we die trying." The Solstice surged forward, breaking the cloak as it powered up its engines and began to speed toward the relic fortress. The Dominion's outer defenses began to fire, bright flashes of plasma lighting up the darkness. Smaller ships, seemingly designed just for this moment, launched from the fortress, swarming toward the human fleet with deadly precision. Deploying the strike teams, Hayes called, his voice steady as ever. "Prepare for entry." The team of elite soldiers, all chosen for their resilience and combat prowess, suited up in their exo-armor, a powerful mix of human engineering and Krellian technology. Hayes led them to the drop pods, his mind sharp with focus. As the pods began their descent into the heart of the relic fortress, the Solstice and its allies engaged in a fierce dogfight with the Dominion ships, keeping the enemy's attention long enough for the strike team to make their move. Hayes and his squad entered the fortress with a bang. Their pods crashed into the steel surface of the massive space station with the impact of meteors, sending out a shockwave that momentarily disoriented the enemy forces. As the doors to their pods opened, the team was met with a roar of Dominion soldiers and automated defenses. The corridor stretched before them, metallic walls lined with flashing red emergency lights. "We push forward," Hayes yelled, his pulse rifle kicking into action as he cut down the nearest soldier. The team fanned out, clearing the hallway with brutal efficiency. The Dominion soldiers were formidable, but the ghosts were faster, more agile, and their unpredictability gave them an edge in the chaos. They fought their way deeper into the fortress, through narrow, winding corridors and high-tech defense systems, pushing toward the central reactor core. With every step, the human warriors moved faster, their training, drive, and rage propelling them forward. Each victory, no matter how small, was a reminder of what they were fighting for, the survival of their people, the end of a galaxy-spanning tyranny. Meanwhile, General Call and his Dread Legions were beginning to close in on the human fleet. The monstrous alien general watched the battle unfold through his private command center, his eyes narrowed in contempt. "They will burn for this insolence," Call growled. "Prepare the siege cannons." But despite the odds, the strike team pushed onward. They reached the reactor room, a massive chamber filled with glowing alien technology. The heart of the relic fortress was vulnerable, just as the intelligence had indicated. "This is it," Hayes said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Place the charges." The team set explosive charges around the reactor's core, their hands moving quickly and with precision. Time was running out. The Dread Legions were closing in, and Call's fleet had begun to launch an all-out assault on the human forces in orbit. The chances of escape were slim. With the explosives in place, Hayes activated the timer. "Let's move," he shouted. The team sprinted for the exit, knowing that one wrong move could mean the end of everything. The charges detonated with an earth-shattering explosion, and the relic fortress shook violently. The massive superweapons core began to destabilize, sending shockwaves through the station. The blast was felt throughout the space, even as the human fleet above fought for survival. "Get to the extraction point," Hayes ordered as the walls of the fortress began to crack and collapse under the reactor's destruction. The clock was ticking, and the battle to escape was only just beginning. The relic fortress was dying. Its core reactor had gone critical, a massive explosion rippling outward and sending tremors through the entire station. The structure groaned, metal walls buckling as the once impenetrable stronghold was torn apart by its own unraveling. The shockwave reverberated through the space around it, the blast visible even to those far away, as the center of Dominion control began to collapse in on itself. Inside, Captain Dylan Hayes and his strike team raced toward the extraction point. The hallways were a maze of flashing red lights and blaring alarms as the walls groaned in protest. Each step they took was punctuated by the deafening roar of the explosion behind them, growing ever louder. There was no time to waste. The countdown was on, and they needed to get out before the entire station disintegrated. "Keep moving," Hayes shouted, his voice strained but resolute. His pulse rifle was slung across his chest, but he didn't need it. There were no more enemies in the immediate vicinity, only the decaying remnants of a once imposing fortress. The real threat now was time. The clock was ticking, and the team had to navigate their way through the labyrinthine corridors before the collapse consumed them. The walls began to crack and splinter, and the very foundation of the station seemed to tremble beneath their feet. Their route to the extraction point had been cut off by falling debris. Captain Hayes and his team were trapped. "We'll have to go through the lower levels," Hayes said, scanning their surroundings. "The blast radius is too large. It'll be faster to take the emergency tunnels." "Move." Without hesitation, the team followed Hayes into a side corridor, heading deeper into the heart of the fortress as it began to tear itself apart. The emergency tunnels were their last hope, but they would have to move quickly. The station was disintegrating faster than they'd anticipated. Outside the fortress, the human fleet continued to fight, desperately holding off the Dominion forces while the clock counted down to the strike team's extraction. The Solstice and its allies were now in full retreat, using every ounce of their firepower to keep the Dominion at bay as the remaining human forces began to withdraw. The Dread Legions were hot on their heels, and General Call, more furious than ever, was determined to wipe out humanity's last hope. "Do not let them escape," Call bellowed from the command of his flagship, his voice like thunder. "Crush them all." His orders were followed by a barrage of energy blasts from his fleet, lighting up the surrounding space as his ships surged forward. The human fleet was taking heavy losses, but they fought back with desperation, knowing that their comrades on the surface were depending on them. Meanwhile, Hayes and his team emerged from the collapsed tunnel into a vast chamber deep within the relic fortress. A single transport shuttle awaited them at the far end. It was their lifeline, a slim chance to escape the dying superweapon before it took them all. But as they made their way toward the shuttle, a familiar, chilling voice echoed through the chamber. "You're too late." General Call, accompanied by a dozen of his most terrifying Dread Legions, emerged from the shadows. His towering form was even more imposing now, a sight that sent a cold wave of dread through Hayes's chest. The massive alien general had come to finish the job himself. Hayes reached for his sidearm, but his hand trembled. There was no time to fight. They had no chance against Call and his forces now, especially with the station collapsing around them. "We're not done yet," Hayes muttered under his breath. He looked around quickly, his mind racing. There had to be a way out. "We'll fight," Sergeant Lila Tran shouted, raising her rifle. "We don't give up." But Hayes knew the truth, they couldn't win this fight. Not here, not like this. The relic fortress was on the verge of destruction, and they were all running out of time. Call stepped forward, his deep red eyes locked onto Hayes. "Your resistance is futile, human," he growled. "Your fleet is broken, your station is falling. There's nowhere to run." With a swift motion, Call raised his massive arm, signaling his dread legions to advance. The battle had come to them, but there was no victory to be had now. The only hope was to escape. Hayes took a breath and turned toward the shuttle. "Get on the shuttle. Now," he shouted. The team didn't hesitate. They sprinted toward the shuttle, even as Call's forces charged toward them. Explosions rocked the walls of the fortress, and the shuttle's engines roared to life, primed to take off. Hayes and his team reached the shuttle's entrance, but not all of them made it on board. Tran, the youngest of the team, was knocked to the ground by a blast as she tried to board. Hayes reached out, but the ground beneath them began to shake violently, and there was no time to go back. With a final, desperate cry, Hayes slammed the shuttle's door shut and signaled the pilot to take off. The shuttle shot into space, and the rest of the team found themselves watching through the windows as the relic fortress exploded in a brilliant, fiery ball. The shockwave rattled the shuttle, but they were free. The fortress, the heart of the Dominion's power, was gone. But the cost had been steep. As they zoomed away from the wreckage, the human fleet retreated into hyperspace, battered but alive. The Dominion had been dealt a devastating blow, but the battle was far from over. General Call's voice echoed in Hayes's mind. The Dread Legions would return. And next time, the stakes would be higher. The explosion of the relic fortress was a momentous victory, one that shook the entire galaxy. The human resistance had crippled the Dominion's most powerful weapon, and for the first time in centuries, the Empire's iron grip faltered. But it was not enough to break the Dominion's resolve. Far from it. Captain Dylan Hayes and his team, now aboard the Solstice, looked out at the wreckage of the once-feared superweapon. The sense of relief they'd felt moments ago had quickly turned to bitter reality. The price of their victory had been steep, and the war was far from over. General Call had survived the blast, his dread legions still intact, and their thirst for vengeance was far greater than before. "We've hit them hard," General Valerie Graves said, her voice tight with the weight of the losses they'd suffered. "But Call isn't done. He'll regroup, and he'll come for us." Hayes nodded, standing at the tactical map displayed on the holographic table. His mind raced as he processed the latest intelligence. Despite the crippling blow to the relic fortress, the Dominion still controlled most of the galaxy's core systems. Their fleet was intact, and their generals were already rallying the remaining forces for a counteroffensive. "Next move?" asked Lieutenant Zara Knox, the fleet's communications officer. "We rebuild," Graves answered, her gaze hardening with determination. "We prepare for the storm that's coming." Over the next few days, the human fleet, along with their Krellian allies, gathered at a neutral location in deep space. The War Council was held aboard the Solstice, and every leader of the resistance met in person to discuss their next move. Hayes was there, his thoughts clouded with the faces of those they had lost, Sergeant Tran, the young soldier who had been killed in the final moments of their escape, and the reality that they could not afford to mourn. "We've crippled their command structure, but Call will rebuild," Hayes said as he stood before the council. "We need to strike before they can regroup, or we risk losing everything we've fought for." Graves, standing at the head of the table, addressed the council. "We know Call's next move. His forces are gathering at the planet Viral, a former Dominion stronghold. It's the key to their entire supply chain and military operations in this sector. If we can take it, we'll have a foothold to push them back." The room was silent as the leaders weighed the risks. The planet Viral was heavily fortified, its atmosphere teeming with Dominion defenders, both ground troops and orbital platforms. The strike would not be easy, and every soldier in the room knew it could cost them dearly. "We've already lost too much," Admiral Tyrell Bannister, one of the human fleet's top commanders, spoke up. "If we don't take Viral, we'll be on the defensive for the rest of this war. We'll never get another chance." Graves turned to Hayes. "Captain, you'll lead the assault on the planet. The mission will require precision, take out their supply lines, cripple their defenses, and eliminate their command center. We can't afford to fail." Hayes met her gaze, his mind already calculating the risks. "Understood. I'll assemble the team." Back on the Solstice, preparations were already underway. The fleet was in motion, every ship loaded with the best human and Krellian soldiers they could muster. The plan was ambitious, bordering on reckless. Viral had never been breached, its defenses so formidable that the Dominion believed it was untouchable. But the human strike teams had proven their worth before, and now they would do it again. Hayes stood in the command center as the final plans were drawn up. The team was ready, each member committed to the task ahead, even though they knew the stakes could not be higher. "We'll get in, get the job done, and get out," Hayes said to his team as they gathered around him. "This isn't just about taking Viral. It's about sending a message to the Dominion: Earth isn't just surviving, we're winning." As the strike force prepared to board their dropships, the weight of their mission settled on their shoulders. The fleet entered the orbit of Viral, and the final assault was underway. The first wave of human soldiers hit the planet's surface with precision, dropping into the thick atmosphere, their descent burning through the skies as they hit the ground in multiple locations. Hayes led his team into the heart of the battle, their objective clear: disrupt the Dominion's logistics, take out their command center, and destroy their critical infrastructure. They would do whatever it took to dismantle the Dominion's war machine. On the surface of Viral, chaos erupted. Dominion forces had prepared for an invasion, but they hadn't counted on the sheer ferocity and determination of Earth's warriors. Hayes's team moved with ruthless efficiency, carving through Dominion defenses and planting explosives in key locations, knocking out communication relays, power grids, and weapons caches. They were on the offensive now, the tide shifting in their favor. But as the hours wore on, the true cost of their success began to show. Call's forces had arrived, his dread legions streaming down from their orbital platforms, landing in full force. The battle on the surface of Viral escalated into a brutal confrontation, with the human soldiers fighting not just for victory, but for survival. The dread legions were relentless, and Call's presence on the battlefield only intensified the bloodshed. His towering form was a terror in the midst of the conflict, cutting through the ranks of human soldiers with deadly precision. The battle was no longer about strategy, it was about holding the line against an enemy that would stop at nothing to crush them. As the sky above Viral rained fire from both sides, Hayes and his team continued to push forward, each step bringing them closer to their goal. Victory was within reach, but at a heavy cost. And though the outcome was still uncertain, one thing was clear: humanity's warriors had awakened a fury in the galaxy that the Dominion would never forget. The battle for Viral had reached its breaking point. The once pristine planet was now a war-torn hellscape, its surface scarred by explosions, craters, and the relentless pounding of energy weapons. The human resistance, bolstered by their Krellian allies, had pushed the Dominion back, but at a heavy price. The tide of battle shifted with every hour, and for every inch gained, humanity had lost lives, equipment, and hope. Captain Dylan Hayes and his team had completed their mission, destroying key Dominion supply lines, crippling their orbital defenses, and obliterating strategic command posts. Yet, despite their success, the Dominion had retaliated with devastating force. General Call himself had descended onto the planet, bringing his full might to bear against the strike teams. The odds had become overwhelming. How much longer until extraction? Hayes asked, his voice strained as he peered through the scorched horizon. 5 minutes, Sergeant Noah Callahan, the team's communications officer, responded, his eyes locked on the countdown. But the dread legions are closing in fast. We might not make it. We'll make it, Hayes said, his voice cold with resolve. We're not dying here. The strike team fought on with unwavering determination, moving through the smoke-choked streets and ruined buildings of Viral's capital city. Their mission was done, but the retreat was proving to be the hardest part. The Dread Legions, led by Kal himself, had surrounded their extraction point, and every moment spent fighting was another step closer to being overwhelmed. "We've got incoming," shouted Sergeant Lila Tran, the last surviving member of the strike team. "Get to the shuttle, now." Hayes nodded sharply. "Move out. We're not leaving anyone behind." The team pushed forward, cutting down Dominion soldiers and mechanical war beasts in their path. With every step, the enemy's forces grew more desperate, the air crackling with the sound of plasma weapons and the roar of alien warships in the skies above. The planet's surface was a war zone, the air thick with the scent of burning metal and charred earth. As the extraction shuttle descended toward the ruined cityscape, Captain Hayes and his team reached the landing zone, but the Dread Legions were already there, closing in on their position. The shuttle's engines roared, and its weapons began to fire on the approaching Dominion forces, but it was clear the shuttle wasn't going to be able to hold off the legions forever. "Go, go, go!" Hayes shouted, firing his rifle as he covered his team's retreat. One by one, they sprinted toward the shuttle's open door, but Kal himself was not far behind. A deep, guttural growl shook the ground as the massive alien general appeared on the horizon. He towered over the battlefield, his dark armor reflecting the burning light of the battle around him. His eyes blazed with fury as he stalked toward the humans, a storm of death on the horizon. "Captain," shouted Tran, her voice filled with urgency. "Get on the shuttle. He's coming for you." Hayes turned to see the Dread Legions closing in, their weapons raised, their eyes full of hatred. Kal's presence was overwhelming, but the humans had faced impossible odds before, and they had won. "You're not getting away this time, human!" Kal roared, his voice thunderous and filled with venom. Hayes gritted his teeth. "We'll see about that." He turned to face his team. "Get on that shuttle. I'll hold them off." The rest of the team hesitated for a split second, but they knew what had to be done. Hayes wasn't going to leave Viral alive, none of them would, unless they made it out. They knew their captain. He wasn't about to abandon the fight now. One by one, the team climbed into the shuttle, but Hayes remained at the edge of the platform, standing his ground against the coming storm. "You're too late, Kal," he shouted, his voice steady, even as the ground beneath him trembled from the approaching alien warlord. "You'll never break us." Kal's eyes narrowed. "Foolish human," he sneered. "You are already dead." With that, he lunged forward, his monstrous blade raised high. But as he closed the distance, a hail of gunfire erupted from the shuttle, and Hayes's team opened fire from within, giving him the opening he needed. Hayes leaped back onto the shuttle at the last moment, just as the massive alien's blade swung downward. The shuttle's engines roared to life, and the team sped off into the sky, the ground below them erupting in a storm of fire as Kal's strike was blocked by the shuttle's defensive shields. For a moment, the team sat in stunned silence, watching the devastation below them as Viral's surface burned. The cost had been high, but they had survived. They had struck a decisive blow against the Dominion. "Is everyone accounted for?" Hayes asked, his voice hoarse as he looked around at his team. The wounded were patched up, the exhausted were holding themselves together, and they all knew they'd done the impossible. "We're all here, sir," Sergeant Tran said, her voice quiet but resolute. "We did it. We crippled their hold on the sector." As the shuttle sped away from Viral, the distant planet became nothing more than a fading smudge against the darkness of space. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. And as they looked ahead, the human resistance knew that the next chapter was just beginning. The Dominion would return, but the message was clear. The unstoppable rise of Earth's warriors had only just begun. The galaxy would tremble at the might of humanity. And with that, the final chapter closes. What did you think? Was the conclusion satisfying?